Good morning. My name's Christy Hensey. I'm from Scott County, Missouri, and I'm here to welcome you to From Succession Planning to Talent Management, a Blueprint for Success. Our presenter today is Brenda, make sure I pronounce this right, Wagon Connect Ivy.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hey, success.
That's right. First step. She has been working on succession planning for about a decade, working with courts across the country and also internationally. She's previously worked with the National Center for State Courts and the Michigan State Court Administrative Office, also with the 37th Judicial Circuit Court in Michigan, and has published recently an article with the Court Manager in winter of 2010. We will be having questions and answers throughout her presentation, so if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you. We are being recorded. That way your questions will be heard by everyone and also picked up on the video. And I would just like to remind you, at the end of this session, please fill out your evaluation forms and just leave them on your table. I'll pick them up when we're complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning, everyone. Is the volume too loud? Because when I get going, it's going to... So you'll bring down the volume? Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming this morning. I'm really looking forward to sharing a blueprint for success related to succession planning and what I'm now calling, and the literature is calling, lots of organizations are calling, talent management programs. Well, first, everybody should have two handouts. One is a 10-page two-sided, and the other is a bright blue sheet of paper. So if you don't have that, if you'd raise your hands, we'll get those to you. Oh, there's some folks in the backs, Christy, that need some materials. If we could. Did Christy step up? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry? Oh, Keith's got them. Thank you. All right. So if you'd raise your hands high so we can get the materials to you. Christy, some folks, yep. All right, while Christy's passing those out, I just want to give you an overview of how we're going to spend our time together in the next hour and a half. First of all, I want to present some what I think are alarming stats and why we need a call for action. If we're going to avert a looming staffing crisis and the ultimate decline in court performance, we need to act now. So I'm going to share some compelling information that I think will make a strong business case for why we need more talent management programs in courts. Second thing is I want to share with you what is and isn't modern day talent management or succession planning. See, succession planning has gotten a bad rap in the workplace today because so many programs are based on the outdated, obsolete, archaic principles of the 1950s. And times have changed since the 1950s. So the challenge is how to take the similar goals when succession planning emerged in the 50s and now overlay it into our dynamic, complex environment of today and update the principles. So I'm going to explain what it is and what it isn't. And then the talent development and management program that I outline in the article. Christy, do you have the article also, the book, or did you give it back to me? Oh, sorry, I have you going all sorts of directions, don't I? My apologies.
I wanted to make sure I got to read it.
I'm sorry. You know, when you're suffering from insomnia, then pick it up, Christy. Anyway, okay, so a blueprint for success, and I lay that out in this article in the Court Manager, but I'm going to delve into it deeper here today. And then I hope we'll have some time for a little scenario that I've put together and to have you talk a little case study at your tables about what you do in this situation. And then finally, I'd like to end with 10 tips for success. Things that I think will help you excel as you fine-tune or implement your talent management programs. So on the second page, every time you see, by the way, a little page number up there, I'm referring to the page number that's in the materials, okay? Because you don't have a copy of the PowerPoint per se. but you've got all the information when there's a page number up there. Okay, so on the bottom of page 2, you'll see there where I'm very action-oriented, and my hope as we go through this agenda is that you'll leave here today with 2 or 3 ideas. 2 or 3 things that you can do in your organization that will formalize, fine-tune, or refine many of the efforts that you already have underway. So that's my goal for today. Before I jump into some of the content, it'd be helpful to me to know who's here in the audience. So court administrators or deputy court administrators, would you raise your hands? Whoa! Great, because you know what? To make succession planning programs or talent management programs succeed today, we have to have buy-in from the senior leadership team. This is something that you cannot or should not, a best practice says, should not delegate to HR. They're a strong supporter of the program, certainly involved in it, but not the champion of it. So I'm just delighted to see that many senior executives raise your hand. How about state judicial educators? Do we have any of you? Couple? All right, great. They're key as well. They can help provide a lot of the tools and resources needed to fine-tune your various educational and training opportunities. So I'm glad you're here. How about judges? Do we have any judges here? Okay, couple. Thank you for being here. Again, a champion of the programs are much, much needed. How about directors or manager level folks? Do we have some of you? I refer to you as our scouts. To have a successful talent management program, we need scouts. We need the people who are seeing the people, your staff, every day out there, your talent sniffing people. So you're out there finding them and making sure that they get into the program. So glad you're here. And then my consultant friends. Where are my consultant friends? All right, can't leave you out. I hope you're friendly consultants and not, you know. All right, good. Let's see, who did I miss? Judge, others. What are others of you that didn't have a chance to raise your hand? Yes, sir. Oh, AOC staff. Do we have any AOC staff? Great. Good, good. University people? Okay, Terry, yep. All right, good. Well, that helps a lot. How about size of court? For those of you who work in courts, the smaller jurisdictions, let's say less than 5 judges, if you would raise your hands. Okay, so a couple of you. Let's go medium to small, or small to medium. Maybe 6 to, I don't know, 10. Okay, so another set. How about 10 to 40 or 11 to 40? Okay, I've got a good group cross-section. What's that, 45 to 100? Okay, over 100? The mega courts, 100 to 200. Okay, anybody? We have anybody here from LA or Orange County or the big mega? All right, so great cross section. What I will try to do as I'm going through is delineate how a smaller jurisdiction might do it versus a larger jurisdiction, and I tried to do that in my article as well. All right, now, in spirit of full disclosure, please only raise your hand if you're comfortable with the question I'm ready to ask. If you don't, I respect your privacy. How many of you could retire today if you so chose? Would you raise your hand? Okay, everybody look around the room. Okay, you could retire now. You're retirement eligible now if you wanted to. Okay. How many of you could retire in 5 years if you wanted to? Would be retirement eligible. Okay, look around the room again. So a greater proportion now. How many in 10 years could retire? Okay, good. Good. Oh, I got John raising his hand back there. All right. All right, here's an honesty check. This is a Terry Curry question. Honesty check. Those of you who might retire beyond after 10 years, 10 to 20 years, 10 to 30 years, how many of you wish you could retire now? Count me in, right? Yes. All right, and how many of you are going to be like Ernie Friesen, never retire? I mean, the guy just keeps like, he's my hero. I run into him at the airports and he says, oh, I'm retired again. And he's going off to work somewhere to do case flow management in some state. The guy never retires. All right. So we had the greatest proportion of you were eligible to retire in 5 years. Probably not a surprise because the baby boomer generation is eking through the workplace in time and whatnot. All right. Let's take a moment to do the test your knowledge. Page 1. Now, those of you who have been in my sessions before, you know that I ask very tricky questions. So, page 1 of the blue handout, it's the front and the back. So if you take a few minutes at your tables and answer these 10 or what do I have, 11 questions. You can either do it individually or with your neighbor if you so choose.
Brenda, I have 2 left if anyone didn't.
Okay, great. We have 2 that need them. I feel like I'm screaming. Is it right? Okay. Thank you, John. So just run through these questions pretty quickly. Just another minute. All right, now the way I will do this is I'll gather up all your papers at the end, we'll grade them, and then, no, of course, I'm just kidding. No, here's kind of the deal. I'll give you answers throughout today's session to these 11 questions. And then we'll review the answers to these at the end of the session at 11:30. And then if we need remedial training at all, that'll take place at 5 o'clock this evening at the happy hour bar down on, in the lobby of the hotel. So I like remedial training. Okay. So you can, don't put those too far away. Keep them handy. How many of you have some sort of emergency preparedness plan? Continuity of a COOP plan, continuity of the operations. Oh, okay, look, whew. How many of you have a strategic plan? Of one that isn't sitting on the shelf and collecting dust, one that's alive and well. All right, great, okay. And how many of you have a plan for handling a high-profile case? Okay. How many of you have a succession plan or a staffing plan or a workforce plan? Okay. I didn't ask you to look around the room, but guess what happened? Everybody has a continuity of operations. Lots of you have a strategic plan that's alive and well. Some of you, probably certain jurisdictions, had a high-profile case plan. A talent management program or a succession plan is really about staffing preparedness. It's preparing your organization to have a pool of qualified people to apply for, be selected for an internal position when it becomes vacant. So it's all about preparing your organization, making sure that you don't skip a beat when people retire from your organization. So here's then some of the stats of why I think we have a very urgent matter on our hands. On page 2 of the blue handout, if you flip this over, we're going to fill in some of these alarming statistics. Pew Research came out with some numbers at the end of December. So beginning in January, it's estimated that about 10,000 baby boomers will turn 65 years of age every day for the next 19 years. Okay, there are boatloads of us in the workplace. I just need to go on record. I'm at the end of the baby boomer generation here. So there are boatloads of us in the workplace. The issue here is a labor shortage is imminent. We're the largest generation going through the workforce. The next largest is the millennials. Okay, they're a big generation. They're the generation that was born between 1980 and 1999 or thereabouts. But they're still far fewer than what the baby boomers are. Now, there's lots of trends that can converge, and immigration things and other things can affect this. But the bottom line is, if there's a labor shortage, we don't have enough people to backfill for the people that are going to be retiring and leaving, there's going to be a war on talent. And the war for talent will not just be in courts. You're going to be competing against the private sector and every other public sector organization for top talent. So it's extremely important for us to position ourselves so that you can win that war for top talent, so that your court doesn't miss a beat. The other thing that makes governmental organizations unique is governmental organizations have a higher proportion of older workers. We're older than the private sector counterparts. So they've attracted the younger generations. Again, it's going to hit the courts hard when we eventually begin to retire. And I realize that this crisis has been actually protracted some because of the current economic situation. We're not retiring as often or as soon as some of us wanted to. We're delaying it. We're living longer, healthier lives, and so it's likely Social Security has changed the rules, and pensions have changed. There's not the benefits for retiring early as much as there used to be. So there's lots of things converging that will make this first statistic, I think, a very compelling reason to have a strong talent management program. All right, how many jobs do you think teens will have by the time they're 38? Ooh, I hear lots of numbers here. You're all very close. 10 to 14 jobs, it's estimated. Now, when I graduated from college, I won't tell you the year, because then I'll date myself. You'll really figure me out. But I was told I'd have 7 jobs on average in my career. I'm on track for that. But now, 10 to 14 by the age of 38. It could be a revolving door. So keeping the younger generation and making sure that you're keeping your top talent is going to be hard with the younger generation, that changing jobs is not an issue. Okay, another one. There's a lot of research out there recently on employee engagement. Blessing and White, Ken Blanchard, AMA, American Management Association, I could go on. And I think it's really interesting research because engagement, fully engaged, is positively correlated to higher productivity, greater efficiencies, a lot of positive business outcomes. So we want engaged workers. We don't want retired in place, RIPs, and we don't want GOMOs. Do you know what GOMOs are? Going through the motion. We don't want people who just come in and go through the motions. Or what I used to say, check your brains at the door when you come to work. We need people who come and think and whatnot. All right, so here are the stats. 33% of North American workers reported that they're fully engaged, what proportion do you think is reported being disengaged? 60, no, not 67. 18%. These are actually better numbers from some 2008 research that Blessing and White did. Disengaged was like 28% a couple of years ago, so it's up. Disengaged went down. So we have a lot of people in the middle that are partially engaged and what I call fence sitters. Those are the people we need to nab and engage and entice and train and develop and move from the fence into the fully engaged. All right, so here's the proportion by generation. 36% of baby boomers say that they're engaged, fully engaged. 30% of the Gen Xers said they were engaged. And what percent of the millennials do you think? Not as bad as 10%. 23%. Now, this wasn't too surprising to me because they say that baby boomers, if you have more authority, if you're paid more, you feel more in control, and therefore they attribute some of the engagement level to where you're at in your career. But the 23% could be problematic, especially if we think about engaged employees are more efficient, higher productivity, etc. We want as many people as engaged as possible. Now, I think some of these stats may be attributed to the economy today, the fact that so many people perhaps are underemployed. So you have people coming out with bachelor's and master's degrees that maybe are waiting tables or something. So perhaps some of that. But this says to me that we have to find a way to engage a greater proportion of the workforce. Okay, engaged employees outperform the disengaged by what proportion? Take a guess. (20 to 28%). I was actually surprised that this wasn't a little higher, to tell you the truth. But when I think about doing more with less and less with less and trying to get more out of the people that you do have, if you have a bunch of disengaged people, you're not getting the most out of them. So again, the more we can engage people in the workplace, and here's my bias, I think talent management programs can do that. All right, couple more stats here. The top 3 engagement drivers. Here's some good news. Okay, more opportunities to do what I do best. So this is the job fit. You know, once you hire people in, are they in a job that matches their talents, their skills, and do they have the opportunity to do what they do best? Here's the really, really, really good news. Maybe. Uh-oh. Career development and training was the number 2, the second highest engagement driver. And the third one was more flexible job conditions. So telecommuting and all sorts of different work arrangements and 4-day work weeks, and I'll work nights so I can spend time with my ailing parents or my young children, blah, blah, blah. Oh, no! I wasn't supposed to show you that. I got trigger happy. Say you didn't see it. Say it isn't so. You didn't see it. Okay, thank you. All right. Here's my qualifier for this next stat. You know, those of you who know me know I am a strong proponent of training, development, and formal education. I wouldn't have 24 years of formal education if I wasn't a proponent of it, and continuous and lifelong learning. But this next stat is not a very positive stat. As you know, there's a lot of discussion about how much training is transferred to the workplace. So if you just do training alone and you don't wrap around coaching and reinforcement and repetition and accountability and feedback and all these other really important components, a lot of the time that people spend in training is wasted. And it's 70 to 90%, some experts say. Now again, if you wrap some of those other things around training, this number goes way, way down. And we know we've done that because of the adult education principles. You know, we bring in real-life simulations and whatnot to teach people in a formal training environment. But to then just cut everybody loose and say, go back to the workplace and expect that they're going to use new information or new skills in the workplace doesn't happen very often. Yes, ma'am. Please. Yes, but we need to get you a microphone.
Feelings. Nothing more than feelings.
Gosh, had I known.
Sorry, I just got carried away.
Well, if we ever have a dull moment, you guys just call for feelings.
Okay. In our soft skills training that
Yep.
is provided in-house, what I find, and I get really, really frustrated with it, is that it always helps you identify the challenges, the problems,
Right.
but it never gives you the solutions.
Right.
And
Right.
I get really frustrated because you start out at the program and you're really excited, yes, that's happening, but then they keep moving on to other challenges.
Right.
And I wish that they would give us examples of success.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, it's only going to get worse. I mean, that challenge isn't going to go away. And I think we just have to be mindful as you're building talent development programs, or if you're refining the ones that you currently have, we have to be mindful of how we send people to training and education, but we have to add other dimensions to it so that this number goes down, so that you're not wasting your training dollars. And in fact, what you're doing is developing your high potential, your talent pools, who are ready to step in then when positions are vacated. All right, just a couple more. I'm giving you an answer to one of the questions on the little self-test here. High performers and high potentials are not the same thing. Okay? The way I kind of look at this is you have people in the workplace, it's kind of a tiered system, that are meeting expectations. Well, first, you may have some that aren't meeting, but they're down here, okay? The second tier, so these folks are meeting expectations. Then you have your high performers. They're exceeding their job expectations. They're doing a really, really, really good job at their job. High potentials, or hypos, they're folks that have something extra. And I'm going to give you a formal definition for hypos. But your talent management program should try to sniff out the rising stars, your high potentials. Okay? And not all high performers are in fact high potentials. And I'll show you why. Some of these stats tell me this. 70%, according to a Harvard Business Review article that was published in May of 2010, said that 70% of the high performers lack the attributes essential to success in future roles. And thus, only 30% of today's high performers are in fact high potentials. So we have to, I'm sorry? Yes. Well, which part? Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's on that page 2 of that sheet that we're going through. So, yes, ma'am. Here, can we have you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Is this statistic kind of another way of talking about what used to be called the Peter Principle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very good.
You do good, you get promoted, but you don't necessarily have the, okay.
Yes. That's exactly right. It's not referred to as the Peter Principle anymore because that was, I don't know, a while ago. But I know what the Peter Principle is, yes. We all do because we say it tongue in cheek. But this stat is alarming to me because it's important as you're refining your talent management program to not just say, oh, you're a high performer in your current job, therefore you're also a high potential. They could be, but there's some other characteristics that we need to look at, and I'll explain those here in a minute. And then the next one is nearly 40%, according to this Harvard Business Review article, of internal job moves involving high potentials end in failure. So again, what we want to do when we have people in the talent management program is to set them up to succeed. We need to do everything to reduce this number so our success rate goes up. All right, 2 more. What proportion of employees are dissatisfied? This is from CNN last year, and it was a poll, but that's my qualifier. It was 45% at the time of last year. I don't know if that's changed. But this one is current. A recent survey results show that between 54 and 60% of the people that answered this survey are ready to jump ship. When the economy improves, of course that doesn't look like it's going to be anytime soon, but when it improves, historically it will, we know it will, we've been there before, but what's going to happen is everybody's going to start jumping ship. Everybody will start switching seats. So, and that's not all bad, but what will be important is to retain your best and your brightest, to retain your rising stars. You don't want those people walking out the door. You want to keep those people. And then 69% of employees leave their jobs to accept more challenging jobs, et cetera, faster advancement and whatnot. So again, I think that a talent management program can address some of this, that you can retain some of your best talent if you put some of these pieces in place. Does anybody have any questions about these 10 stats? Okay, I'm going to just keep on going. Please jump in here if you've got any comments or questions. So, being modest, what is the learning curve for somebody to come in and do your job? How long would it take for somebody with court experience to come from another court and learn how to do your job? 18 months. Anybody else? How long? 2 years? That's coming from another court, right? Okay, what if somebody doesn't have any court experience? What's the learning curve?
3 years.
You can testify 3 years. Okay, so wow. So you're estimating, I know, 18 months to kind of get in stride, to learn the nature of the job. Well, there were lots of people that raised their hands who are eligible to retire either now or in the next 5 years. So that's your window of opportunity to begin to develop folks so that hiring somebody, a tried and true person internally, is much less expensive than a bad hire. Hiring somebody in from the outside that then fails. You recruit, you develop, you've invested in, and then they fail, then you're back to square one. So again, there's an incentive then to commit to a talent management program that can fill the slots as they become vacant. All right. Yes, sir. Can we get the microphone?
When you say a talent management program, is that a program that's clearly defined within our organization, which all employees know about, or is it something that top management has in it as a part of its toolbox?
Okay, it's a great question. And it's a great segue into my giving you a definition for talent management. So what is this beast that I'm talking about? That is a critical decision that every organization needs to make. First of all, it is a program. It's a formal program. I'll just jump ahead here in the interest of time. It's a formal program, page 4. And I'm sorry, this looks like really theoretical, da-da-da. But it's a formal program that you commit to And you have some key decisions to make. At what level, who's going to get in, how, etc. So your question is, I know the courts in Ventura County, everybody was eligible to get into the program. Do I have any folks here from Philadelphia? Okay, help me out here. You also, your management development program allowed anybody to enter, is that right?
That's correct. But we had a 2 or 3 tiered management development program also. So there was a individual, a first tier that was open to everyone. Then there was a second tier that was open to managers and supervisors. Then there was a third tier that was open to directors and deputy court administrators.
That is correct. So these are key decisions that you've got to make as you're kind of designing your program. And the Ottawa courts, you have a multi-tier, multi-level. So in Ottawa, you've got everybody gets in by application, and then they have to be accepted. Then where Charles, yours was a management track tier, you have a professional track that people can go into with levels, and then a management track with levels. Is that right, Kevin and Sandy?
That's correct. The one thing that we did separately with the management track was to add in some additional training for HR management, for labor negotiations, contract administration, that type of thing.
Right. Okay. So one of the decisions that you have to make is who gets in is what are your key positions that you're trying to backfill for? Who are your, is it just going to be a management track? Are you going to have a professional track so that if people aren't kind of management material, they can still get in and go through your talent management program? All very, very important key decisions. So this definition of talent management, talent development and management, in the article I differentiate it because there's 2 major components here. There's a development component. So there's what's in it for the employees or what's in it for your high potential staff. You're committing that you're going to develop them and that you're going to help them through the system and learn about the court and hopefully stay. But there's no promises. So as much as there's no promises of promotion, by having a talent development program, there's no promises that anybody will stay either, or that they won't leave. But if they leave, at least you're contributing to the contribution to the profession, and they'll go land in another court and do their magic there. So there's talent development, and then the talent management piece is you're not doing this just for warm and fuzzies. You're doing this so that you can prepare the organization. It's that management component, that you can have the right people with the right skills in the right places at the right times. Right skills, right people, right place at the right times. And so that's why when we get into this blueprint for success, you'll see one of the first things is you've got to do some sort of a workforce analysis to understand how vulnerable you are and to project what your future staffing needs might be. The difference between some of the traditional management programs that I mentioned earlier that come out of the 1950s, they were criticized because it was an heir-apparent system. You were deemed to be a fair-haired child, specially groomed, a certain pecking order. It wasn't transparent. It was closed, not inclusive. Those were some of the criticisms. There were very complicated forecasting, long forecasting elements of the traditional programs. Very complicated, very slow to move. And as I mentioned starting out, today's programs have to be very dynamic. They have to be much more transparent, flexible, expansive, inclusive, on and on. So the heir apparent, we're trying to get away from that. That's why the whole notion is rather than an heir apparent program, what you're developing are talent pools, which are just groups of high potential staff that you're developing to become executives or managers or certain functions to step in when positions become vacant. What I need to qualify now as I'm getting ready to move into this blueprint for success is this looks like a very, I have to do two things first. I'm sorry. I'll do these really quickly. I've been using high potential staff, and I've been using the term key positions, and I just need to clarify what those are. These high potential staff, remember I said they're more than just your high performers. High potential people, I guess in a nutshell, these are not special people, they have special skills and talents. They're the folks that you've identified as having the right stuff. And the research on talent management programs and competency models for succession planning purposes is that personal characteristics, some of the attributes that people have, like they're adaptable to change, they're eager to learn, they're resilient, they have social and emotional skills, etc. Some of those are more important in finding your high potentials. They can work in a political environment. So those are some of the special attributes that you're looking for in your high potential staff. So as you're examining your high performers, what you have to be asking, is this person capable of advancing a couple of levels? Are they prepared? Do they want to? This is the Peter Principle. Have they reached a career plateau and they're like as far as they're going to go? Or do they have the right stuff? So here's kind of the definition of hypos, and then here's the definition of key positions. And the reason why I'm focused on key positions is a talent management program, in my mind, is different than your general training and development program that everybody should receive. I mean, everybody that comes into your organization should be oriented, should be trained on what they need to do their job well, etc. But this is a specialized, a focused program for high potential people for those positions that are hard to fill or especially leave your organization vulnerable. They require specialized knowledge. So what are some, I know the DC courts, you've recently implemented some talent management programs. We have Philadelphia, Ventura, Ottawa. We have folks here from South Dakota. I know Pat Dugan did some work in it. What were some of your your key positions that you are targeting? Charles, yours were, I'm sorry, Kevin, apologies. Kevin, yours were in the management ranks. Can you give us a couple of examples?
We're looking to identify potential employees who can fill supervisor, management level positions, and also our technology positions, where not only do you just have difficulty bringing people in, finding talented people to bring in, but knowing the court-related applications and how they affect your court.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. My apologies. Sandy and Kevin, what are a couple of your examples of key positions?
We have probably 50% of our top management or administrative positions in the court that are eligible to retire in the next 5 years.
Okay.
So we're trying to focus on making sure that we have people that can step up and backfill some of those positions.
But they weren't just management, right? Could you give us a couple of examples of like non-management, since Charles gave us some of the management? Sandy, do you have some in juvenile detention and juvenile services?
Yes, our detention center certainly is, actually that's the youngest part of our organization. So really our probation officers are probably the most aging population. Mm-hmm. And actually when we did our workforce analysis, we found that 25% of our entire circuit court and probate court staff were eligible to retire within the next 5 years, which was huge.
So when you did your key position analysis, do you have like 29 or so key positions, or how many?
We had 30.
30, okay. How about in D.C.? Have you focused on key positions, Laura? Hold on, we'll get you the microphone.
We haven't really focused on key positions.
Okay.
But we did develop a management training program as a start.
Excellent.
But 30% of our management force is eligible for retirement.
Okay. Okay, so you're
in the next 5 years.
All right, so management, you're really focusing right now on your management. Excellent. To put a plug in, the D.C. Court are going to be making a presentation later this afternoon on your program, so the last session of today. All right, so it's important. This is a court-specific thing. Some jurisdictions have identified a court public information officer as a key position. A state judicial educator might be a key position if it meets these sorts of criteria. Maybe one of your domestic violence, your mediation program people, or your specialty courts might end up deciding that these are key positions. But again, a TDM program is very focused and very specialized on high potentials, trying to develop talent pools to fill these few key positions in the court. Because this is time intensive and it doesn't have to be costly, but it's an investment of time. And that's why you want to make sure that it's very focused. All right, here on page 5 in your materials, here's a blueprint for success. Now, I'm going to run through, I'm going to spend a little more time on a couple of these. And like I said, it looks very stepwise and very circular, like first you start with one. This would be an ideal world. And I know we don't live in an ideal world. I wish we did. So what I suggest is, or what I bet, is that many of you have different pieces of this already in the works. And what I suggest is, as I'm going through each of these, is to kind of pinpoint, oh, I can fine-tune our program by doing X, Y, or Z. Some of you may need to start up at the top. So it's not a do this stepwise is what I'm saying. All right, so completing a workforce profile and analysis, the whole point here is to understand how vulnerable your organization is and build a business case for doing it. And these are all things that are on page 5 in your materials. And these are just some examples of some of the things that you would want to look at as you're doing a workforce analysis. Okay, and I'm just going to give you some examples from Tucson, Pima County Superior Court, working with them currently on a strategic planning process. But in the trends analysis, what we did is captured some of the HR staffing trends. So thanks to Pima for letting me use these statistics. So this is judicial officers. See, I think we're going to have turnover and newer judicial officers, more judicial officers retiring in the near term than staff. And I know, Mark, you and I talked about your judges are turning over rapidly. I know they are in Tucson. How many others of you are having a lot of turnover in your judicial ranks? Okay, not as many as I thought. Okay. But so this was judicial officers. Nearly 50% of the judicial officers in Pima County are 60 or over. So they're preparing and ramping up for trying to orient a whole boatload of new judges who will be taking the bench. Here's their court staff stats. So 14% are 60 or above. That doesn't look too bad. But almost 50% are 50 and above. So in the next 10 to 15 years, they've got nearly half their staff that will be eligible to retire. Now, this is their whole court staff. We didn't break it down by management levels, which had we been doing talent development program, we would have. We would have drilled down like I know you did in Ottawa courts. Here's some of the percentages of employees that are eligible for retirement. So these red bars are the judges. So right now, 40%. In 5 years, another 25%. And then staffing, like I said, judges are higher now, but you've got across a 10-year span a large proportion. Yeah, Eric? Oh, please. I'm sorry. We got to get the microphone because they're recording this session.
Well, I think it's also important to point out that this was an underestimate because a number of people had prior government experience or had purchased retirement time. So we think it's greatly in excess of 50% will be gone within 10 years.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Eric. I forgot that footnote. So again, it just gives you a snapshot of what's your vulnerability, what are going to be some of your staffing needs. Had we been doing this for a TDM program, we would have even drilled down further here. We would have looked at their key positions, their management staff, their executive level people, maybe their IT, et cetera. Budget director might be a key position to find out what some of the vulnerabilities would have been in those occupations. Yes, Kip.
What about the trend we see with people retiring, the double dippers, that, hey, I'm going to retire and I'll be back to work the next day.
Right.
And, you know, you can look for those. I've got my eye all over Eric's people. As soon as they get ready to retire, I'm just going to bring them up to my county. So that may affect the numbers some, or, I mean, like you said, that tendency that we're working longer now. We can't retire at 60 anymore. So. Yes.
That's why, like 10 years ago, there was a lot more activity in talent management because it was like everybody, the economy was good or better, and everybody was getting ready to retire, so it was like this big wave of people were going to be leaving. Well, then things got a little worse. Now conditions have changed. We're working longer. We're taking different jobs after we retire. It really has changed the landscape. But you know what? Those of you who aren't baby boomers, eventually we will retire. Eventually we will go bye-bye. Or die, heaven forbid. No, we all got to, somebody said it over here, not me. No, it's what it's done, I really think the economy and just the changes in Social Security, which more are coming, obviously. The fact we are living longer and healthier lives, we're working longer, it's just going to protract this exodus. It's not going to be a mass exodus like we once thought. It's kind of going to be a trickle effect. Yep, Kevin and...
I'm just curious what other people are experiencing. He raised a great comment about us looking for talent that's out there and waiting for people to retire and then the double dippers coming back in. But we just recently learned in Michigan that some of the retirement systems are changing their rules and prohibiting people from double dipping and basically saying that if you leave and you retire, you cannot draw your retirement if you go back to work for the same organization. So I don't know what's happening in other places, but that's something we're starting to watch more carefully.
Yep, we have another comment up here, Christy.
I think the other thing we need to look at is whether public employment is going to continue to be a good deal for people, and whether it's going to attract good workers. For a long time, public employment was a good thing. But now we're seeing a little bit of a backlash, and I think some of the good retirement plans that some of you have, I say some of you because only judges in our state have that good retirement plan. The rest of us just have to work forever.
I see, okay.
But I think some of those things and the public attitude towards those things are changing, and that's going to affect our workforce.
Right, I think you're right. Gordy?
Brenda, I was going to say that vulnerability sometimes is not just age-driven. It can be, you know, basically a lot of courts are experiencing some vulnerability when it comes to the kinds of functions that they're in. So, you know, all of the late stuff that's been done by the center and others on re-engineering, reorganizing, organization development. So there may be portions of the court that are vulnerable. So how do you deal with that?
Well, would you find that out through your workforce analysis? See, again, you'd focus on what are your key positions. So if you've identified IT or some key operational level people, that are your key positions that you know would leave the court vulnerable, then you do an analysis of that level of people.
What if you decide you're going to get out of the problem-solving court business? In other words, you're going to go back to the basics. You know, like a lot of budgets seem to be focused on, you know, let's go back to the real core values and those sorts of things. So, you know, problem-solving courts seem to be certainly active in today's world, but, you know, who knows, in the next, say, 5 years, you know, are we going to be in that business? It's a costly business, and budgeteers are saying, you know, tell me how I can cut the budget tomorrow.
Right.
So what if you have people that are, say, for instance, in problem-solving area, and, you know, the court starts to do a strategic plan and says, we don't want to be in this business anymore?
Well, I would say in your talent management program, they would not necessarily be a key position then if you've made a strategic decision. I mean, I think there would be other ways that you would integrate them, try to not lose them, et cetera, but I wouldn't see it necessarily as part of this. I mean, you'd have to recognize it if you make a strategic decision to get out of that line of business. But okay, Sandy, you have another thing? Okay.
Before you leave workforce analysis, I just wanted to mention that if you get if you're going to do a workforce analysis and you're getting your data from your HR department, be cautious. It may not be accurate. Be sure to validate it.
Do you have firsthand experience with that?
I have firsthand experience, and we had to validate every single record with the people involved. And so it can become a laborious process, but it can really skew your data if you get it from your HR department and it's inaccurate.
Okay, so that's a good tip. I should also say another plug for some CEDP projects on talent management. Pat Dugan completed one, she's a state court administrator, I think in South Dakota, right? Completed one a number of years ago. Sandy and Kevin and another colleague, Kelly, have recently completed some research on talent management, and then Keith from the DC courts has recently finished a dissertation on it. So I think more and more we're getting some really good research and some writings on how this applies in courts. So Google these folks or catch them afterwards. I think there's some great info out there. The separations analysis that we did in PIMA, as you can see, the voluntary here, 61 people left, and we've got the retirement projections. For a talent management, we would have drilled down. What proportion of these people are your high performers? What proportion were high potentials? Now, courts generally right now don't think about high performer or high potentials. In fact, not a lot of organizations think this way. The engineering firm I'm working with in Denver, they don't think this way either. But when we did this separations, it's if 61 people are leaving are your mediocre performers or your subpar performers, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You want to keep your best talent. But if all of these folks are your top talent and they're walking out the door and going somewhere else, that's something to pay attention to. Okay, so we kind of drilled down a little bit. All right, so the first step is do that workforce analysis. If you have a hunch, maybe it's just going and getting some data that will approve your case, give you a good business case for why you need to invest in this to convince your senior leadership. And if you already have that commitment, then it'll help you project your future staffing needs. All right, the second thing in this blueprint is to develop a policy and procedure. Many organizations have a TDM program without this step, but here's why I'm advocating for this step. Is what you're doing here is creating a framework for what's your program going to look like, and you're getting commitment from senior leadership, and you're just writing that down. So I know Philadelphia, they have an administrative governing board. Did I get that right? Okay. And they did a formal policy because they wanted their judges to buy into this. They wanted a formal statement out there saying, we commit to investing in internal talent and hiring from within if it benefits the organization. And And here it's where you start to think about those critical decisions like who's going to get in and how do you get in? Is it voluntary? Do you need somebody to be a sponsor for you, to nominate you into this program? And just a lot of those key decisions. Here is Philadelphia's. You do not have this. I'll be happy to share this with you if you want to connect with me somehow after the program here. But Kevin mentioned the levels. And do you guys have levels in DC? Or do you have a okay, you're down here at the management program then that you've designed? Okay. Philadelphia had all court staff can enter this program as long as you're in good standing with the court. And Ottawa did the same because they wanted to be inclusive. They didn't want to exclude anybody who was a go-getter that says, I want a career at the court. So they let people apply, but they actually had to apply. So it was like, okay, you're a go-getter, you want entrance into the program, fill out an application, get approval, do some certain things. And I know Ottawa has developed a great checklist and application process to kind of get in, which puts the onus on the employee to take responsibility. I want to get in there. Once you're in, then there were these level 1. These were your low or your no cost training options. So these are kind of your generic training, brown bag lunches, what's a pro se litigant, what are court procedures, and some of the city-sponsored training, your webinars. This is where you could tap your state judicial education resources, where you have online tutorials and self-study and whatnot. To go from level 1 to level 2, there was a definitive process here, and they had to apply again to jump to the next. And here you needed certain criteria. Ottawa has something similar. Although I don't have a picture up there to show you, I kind of hand drew. And Kevin and Sandy, you can clarify. But everybody gets in as long as they're willing to apply, complete the application. This is phase 1. Then in Ottawa's, unlike Philadelphia, which just focused on a management track, Ottawa's got this professional track you can go, or a management track. And then this is a higher level of training and development. And you can see there some of the advanced programs, the state conferences, some of the mentoring and 360-degree feedback, and some of the master's programs and online certificate programs were made available. And then again, there's another level. And so this progression of the thinking is that once you get to phase 3, you've arrived. You should have been through a process where you're ready now, is what they call it. You're ready now, so when a vacancy opens up, you can apply. You're positioned then to be in better standing and hopefully get the job. And Ottawa then has another, you can go into the executive. Is that right, Kevin and Sandy? Okay, I don't want to misspeak here on your behalf. But
I've never thought of our model looking like a crack pipe.
No, this is my drawing capabilities. It has nothing to do with your program, all about my inability to draw. Okay. Glad you, well, never mind. I'm not going there. Okay. Yes, sir.
This is a question for Kevin and Sandy. I suppose I could just turn around and ask them. But when you advertise for positions, do you make reference of this opportunity in your announcements of vacancies when you're trying to fill them?
At this point, we've not done it with advertisements. We certainly go through this in new employee orientation. We have gone through it as part of the regular performance evaluation process that we have. But one thing that we do when we advertise for new positions, we make it clear that where, as a court, we're an organization that is committed to continuing education and continuing professional development.
We should also say that you guys just rolled out your program formally May 1.
Correct.
So there might be more of that as time elapses.
But we are using it in our interview process.
Great.
When we interview candidates, we do use it there for detention and whatnot.
Okay, so at this phase of the process, when you're thinking about a policy statement, what you're starting to do is kind of think through some of these key decisions. Who gets in, how many phases, how many tracks will there be? And again, this looks complicated. For the smaller jurisdictions, start small, just wrap some formality around some of the things you're currently doing, like some of the informal training. And you can just fine-tune your program this way. You don't have to do the full-blown. In fact, I wouldn't encourage you to do the full-blown. Just start with what you have. Yes?
Any of these jurisdictions that are doing this, do they have any type of policy that either assures or guarantees people that only people who've been part of this program will be considered for these jobs? Is that part of the?
To my knowledge, I'm going to speak on behalf of.
Of course, not Philadelphia.
Oh my goodness! I stepped on your glasses, or somebody's. Sorry. Sorry, a little time out there. Can I have a do-over? Can we rewind the tape on that one? No promises. I think the promise that Philly made and that some other organizations that I've worked with has made is that we will put you through the program. Anybody can apply. But what it does is put you in better standing for the job. Like you meet the job requirements better. You're proven number. You've just positioned yourself much better to be selected for the job. But anybody can apply. So you don't trump, if you will, the merits, the internal hiring policies. Kevin, did I? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. If you want, there are sample policy statements out there. If you want some samples, just contact me, because in the interest of time, I'm going to blow by. A lot of this is not starting from scratch. You've got some. There's a publication that we did for Philadelphia back in 2005 or 6 that's got their sample policy. In fact, it's actually in the article. I think we included Philly's policy statement in the court manager article. All right, I'm going to kind of blow by these pretty quickly because we've talked some about it and I want to get to a couple of other things. But this stage of the developing your program is the most detailed, most labor intensive, and it's got a lot of things in motion here. But it's really important to define your scope. What are your key positions and how many talent pools do you need? Like smaller courts may only need one talent pool. So it's just everybody's kind of like the Philly. You've said it's a management, you're developing folks for that pool. Ottawa has decided 2 or 3, really, when you track up to the executive level. But smaller courts, probably just 1. Or if you have a really specific technical job, you might have like a technology talent pool where you're trying to get people out of your technology ranks to fill a key position, or a state judicial educator or whatnot. But again, keep it simple. That's a rule of thumb. Developing success profiles, I'm going to try to give you an overview of this. There's been a ton of research done on leadership and management success profiles for the future. I would say you don't have to start from scratch on this. Start with what's out there and then customize it to your court culture. But these are essential pieces to defining what success looks like. And remember, this is you have your whole training and development that everybody has access to, and this is a very specialized program that you're developing for people who want to get in or who meet the criteria to get in. So what you want to do is call out of what success looks like and define it for people, not just your meets performance. This is where you got to define what's a high potential, what's a rising star do in our organization, different than just what's in your job specs. The derailment behaviors is, I think, really important for a talent management program, because what you want to know is what's going to knock the wheels off the bus. You know, what's a person do that's really going to derail their career? And defining that for folks so people who are going through know what not to do as much as they know what to do. So without, I want to just give you an example. This is on page 8. This is what Ventura did. They took their core competencies that applied to all staff from their strategic plan that came out of their values. So these were their 5 core competencies for staff. Okay, we then defined those, we set those aside. We then looked at, well, what's it take to be a high potential or the best of the best? You want to separate your average performers from your best performers, or I should have said that the other way around. What you're trying to do is call out your best performers and separate them from your average performers. So what they did is identified these 7 management core competencies. Philly has a set also that we did some 360s around. And then the pink over there is an executive competency model that I helped an engineering firm create for a presidency position. And as you can see, there's a lot of overlap. Again, you don't have to start from scratch on these because it's there. The devil's in the details. So you generally describe the competency. Here's where the rubber meets the road. What are the behaviors that you're looking for as you're developing people? And that's in your material. So I don't want to go into this too much. It's very detailed. But you have to paint a picture of what success looked like. Create a success profile for your key behaviors. How many of you have taken a social and emotional intelligence assessment? Anybody? Oh, see, I was so excited when I saw it on the program yesterday. There's a lot of traction is being gained around the social and emotional intelligence, and some suggestion that it's not IQ that makes all the difference in the world. You can be really, really, really smart, but not have much EQ, emotional quotient. And I saw some research recently from Daniel Goleman, a big prolific writer in social and emotional intelligence, and he projects 60 to 80% of success. He says in life, I'll just restrict it to management and leadership, is attributed to social and emotional intelligence. Not your technical skills, how much you know about case flow management or technology, but how you interact with people. So just a little plug here. I am offering, if any of you want to be exposed to social and emotional intelligence, see me afterwards. I'd like to get more people interested in it. So here's a special offer to folks who are here. This is a normal $500 value. So if you're interested, just see me. I'm not going to take more time here. All right. Develop training, educational, and on-the-job development opportunities. All right. So we have a lot of training in place now. I say this 10-20-70 rule. This is not scientific at all, but it's kind of known in the marketplace, if you will. And don't throw eggs yet or tomatoes. But this rule is 10% of learning comes from formal training. Formal training. Only 10%. 20% of your learning will come from coaching and formal feedback. So you add training plus this, and then where you should be really ramping up is 70% of what's learned for your high potential people is on-the-job learning. Action assignments, stretch assignments, job, throw me into a budget meeting, have me write a grant, have me do a presentation at the judges' meeting on our caseload stats. So it's give me on-the-job experience, real-life experience in the heat of the moment. That's where the biggest learning curve is. So if you just do formal education and training, I would say one of the opportunities you might have is to add some of these other dimensions, like job shadowing and job rotations, exposing me to other areas of the court, giving me special projects. These are all examples of the 70% that's really going to teach me the skills that I need to know to be effective. So, rule of thumb here, obviously all those formal and informal training programs that you do are great. We need to keep doing the brown bag lunches and the special things you do on site. We need to tap the city and county and state training programs that are offered, the university programs, definitely maintain those, but add these other pieces that are going to round out, if you will, the talent management program. And especially in today's environment, there's a lot of no and low-cost training opportunities. I know in the Philly report we did, there's a lot listed, and I think in our article we've also listed a lot of those things. I'm going to just skip by these. The database I want to mention, one of the things that I've seen happen is you get cranking along, you're excited about kind of fine-tuning these different dimensions, and then you forget to kind of build a database as you go, and then a year later or 2 or 3 you look back and you say, well, we don't have the information to know whether we met our program goals or whether people are progressing through, like, are they ready now? So I would just say that there's, and I think it's in your materials, there's some very sophisticated HIRS systems already have a function in there for this. And you can just tap into collecting people's background information. You know, what's their career in the courts looked like up to this point, but also what are some of their career goals. So you got that future piece. And then what have they done as they've worked their way through the system. So I would just say think up front about making sure you can track these. And an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database will suffice also if you're just kind of at a rudimentary level. You don't need to go out and spend $40,000 on an HR component that will do this. Okay, and this is where you're going to really flesh out all the workings of the program. And I would say see Kevin, see DC, see the Ottawa folks for some of the things that they've designed to make their procedures work, to describe how the program works, who gets in, how you go through, etc. It's really important here to then prepare your managers. Remember, those of you who said you were middle managers, you're the people out there sniffing out and finding the top talent. You've got a key role in this, and we need to train and prepare you for it. Develop the communication plan and do a briefing of managers and whatnot. So, steps 4 and 5 are just rolling out your program. I say it so flippant, just rolling it out. No, it's very important. But once you've done all this other work, you're pretty ready to go. So here's a scenario. You know your court's vulnerable. You have a hunch. You look around, you see lots of folks who look like they're eligible to retire soon. You don't have extra staff. You don't have extra money. Your leadership team is preoccupied with other immediate or urgent activities. Incidentally, these were all things that were told to me as I talked to court leaders around the country. Why aren't you doing a lot of this? And these were the top reasons given. You lack full executive support. But now you have some ideas on how you could fine-tune a formal TDM program. So what I'm curious about are what are some of the ideas that you have We're going to spend like just a few minutes on this. I'm not going to have you do it at your tables. We'll just do it as a large group. But what are some things that you can do now with some of these different components to fine-tune some of the efforts that you already have in place? Yes?
This doesn't really address what you have on the board right now, but it's just a couple of observations that I've noticed in our current economy based is that we get applications now for 2 and 3 times the number of people that we've had in the past. So if we've got 20 applications for an entry-level position, we may get 40 or 60 applications now for those same positions.
Wow.
And I'm also finding that the quality of the applicants has grown dramatically. Like you said earlier, we're seeing people with college degrees for entry-level positions, and it really can help us as a court because we can draw upon these better qualified applicants. Another thing I've noticed also is that when you find some of these qualified applicants, you have to find ways to challenge them and bring them in, when you bring them in and find tasks for them that are engaging to them. They just don't want the day-to-day activities that sometimes these jobs require. They want something that really challenges them. So this is very helpful to us.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Yep, John?
One of the things that I think is happening now, and I'm really curious about if this creates more opportunity to do this than maybe ever before, that a lot of people we work with, they're now looking at 30+% smaller workforce than they had a few years ago. They're going to combine facilities, so they're like, geez, we're going to close down this facility, and we've got to move all those folks in. Even to the things like we're no longer going to structure the court the same way. We're not going to have criminal and civil divisions and base staffing that way, and so forth and so on. So I guess my question is, how do you take into account, and then Gordy's point about all these new work processes. So you've got all these things happening, right? And you need to have some alignment there between what your new processes are, the way you want to structure and organize your court, and then figure out the workforce, right? What you want the workforce to look like now and in the long term. How do you do all that, and how does this fit in? In other words, in a time of real crisis where you really do have fundamental change, how do you make this part of the opportunity to include this as part of that?
Do you have another 3 hours?
Yeah.
John, that's a loaded question. Very, it's not easy, and here's how I would recommend you do it. It's not an ideal world. Nothing is static. So all dynamic. I would say that you're in the throes of this. You begin to bring up your high potential, who are eager to learn, eager to change. These are people who can help you define what this new system looks like. Now, this is in light of then everybody fearful of, oh my God, my job's going to change and I might not have a job tomorrow. That's the reality. And so I think the courts that have done it are doing so, they're presenting it in a very positive light. This is something we're doing for you. We're investing in you. It's going to help us too. And so it has to go on concurrently, albeit not easy. Okay, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you have, because I think essentially what you're saying is this provides you, all this stuff is happening, that it provides you an opportunity to get ahead of that and say, look, we know all this is going on. This gives us an opportunity to really shape something better and make sure that we've got the folks who want to be on that voyage with us, that they're the right folks and they're going to be in the right place at the right time.
Right. That's right. Because remember, this is an inclusive program. It's not you're excluding. So if people really are eager to learn, eager to do, willing to take the initiative to apply for, then they're in. If you have that sort of, and that's what I would recommend, so that you're not excluding folks, and then you bring them along on this tough journey. You involve them in your strategic planning. I know in Ottawa that's a condition of one of these levels, is that you're involved in strategic planning and some of the implementation of their strategic initiatives. So you build that into what's going on day to day. Yeah, Kevin, do you have I'm sorry, Keith, my apologies. I have too many Kevins and Keiths and Charleses.
And Brenda, what's more is you've already given us the numbers, and the numbers obviously are very telling, and they signal to us that this is a program that is not necessarily nice to have, but it's a must-have.
Right. Thank you. That's a great endorsement. Okay, do you have any ideas? What would you do to fine-tune? You've got a hunch, you don't have money, you don't have extra staff, but there are opportunities. What are some ideas that you would do? To either go back, get executive support, begin to implement or fine-tune lower cost options. Is that what you would do? Would you? Yeah? Right there in the back.
I was agreeing with you. I think all those are good options. The other thing that I think you have to address, and maybe talked about it in the beginning, is overcoming the fear of bringing people into management, particularly when you're telling them this is a potential for you, there's no extra money in it, but we're going to give you all the stress you can handle. Okay. So I think that's one of the things. But I think you articulated all of the advantages, and in Arizona, we generally rely on the larger counties like Eric's and Marcus's,
Maricopa.
Pima and Maricopa, because they have the resources to develop programs, and we can take advantage of them.
You know what I didn't say earlier, I didn't talk about feeder positions. In the larger courts, you'll likely have what are called feeder positions, and they're the folks that are the training ground, if you will, for the next level up. There's some feeder courts. You have the feeder courts here. Okay, we're running up against time. I'm going to skip over all of the 10 tips for success because I've talked about many of them. But I want to end with this last one, and then remember, we're going to review that self-test, make sure we have 100%, or we've got our plan for remedial training at the hotel lobby bar. So tip number 10, don't let what you can't do interfere with what you can do. My basketball, I have a love for NCAA basketball, and John Wooden is the author of that quote. Don't let what you can't do interfere with what you can do. So I hope what I've done today is presented you with like all of the essential components of a TDM program, and please just take one or two things back that you can use to fine-tune what you're already doing. Mike Planet, who was the court exec in Ventura, he has a quote in this article, and in essence he says, don't try to do it all at once. Take a couple of these ideas, formalize it, and what he says in his quote is just make sure you're formalizing it under this framework, so that as time goes on, you take action now, you revise and you expand later, that it's starting to look more and more and more and more like a formal TDM program. All right, are you ready for the answers? I have 3 minutes. Yes, John.
Do you have data, experiential data that you could share with us of the success of organizations that take this approach in hiring from within rather than bringing from people from outside, and of retaining the high potential people?
I don't. I have anecdotal is all. You know, we're in a real transition, trying to leave behind these traditional TDM practices and trying to adapt these to our new environment. I don't know of anybody. Terry, do you know of any organization that would have some longitudinal research on Terry Curry for MSU?
I think the place to look, unfortunately, is the private sector,
Yeah.
where there are organizations that are very successful and have been in the long run in doing this. And you can take examples, Shell Oil, sort of example after example in the private sector where this has become much more routine over the years.
And they've had to re-engineer kind of how they do TDM as well. I mean, those sorts of organizations, because like I said, these grew out of the 1950s, and they didn't get traction because they were just didn't work well. Yes.
And as far as your federal agencies are concerned, is GAO, the Department of Defense, NASA, Health and Human Services. And so there's a couple of others, but just to name a few.
And I bet they're cited in your dissertation. All right, good. We'll Google you. We'll find it. All right, so here are the answers. Number 1, succession planning is the process of selecting a successor for a key job. True or false? False. That's hiring, what I've described there. Succession planning is you're developing those talent pools for people to apply for. Okay. Number 2, succession planning activities should be aimed at all jobs and include all staff. False. Okay, here's my technicality. Remember, not all jobs. We want just those key positions defined. But yes, all staff. Ideally, you want all staff to be able to get in or apply for or have access to this if they're really go-getters and they want to work hard, do extra things to meet the TDM requirements. All right, number 3, high potential staff are the same as high performing. False is correct. To avoid heir apparent, organizations instead are creating talent pools. True or false? True. Having one talent pool is sufficient for small courts. Larger courts may have 2 or 3 or more. True or false? True. True. Participating in succession planning activities assures the person of being promoted. False is correct. Remember, no promises of promotion, but no promises that they'll stay. Now, that's different. In some private sector, they have a commitment of 2 or 3 or 4 or however many years, although that may be changing also. Number 7, organizations do succession planning to have a continuous and deep supply of internal candidates that are developed and ready to fill key positions when they become vacant. Whew. True. Human resources staff should lead and manage succession planning programs. True or false? False is correct. They're key players. We need our senior executives to lead it. Additional training and education is the most effective way of strengthening your court's succession planning activities. True or false? False. Most effective is the key word there. Again, technicality. It's one way, but we got to make sure, remember the 10-20-70 rule. We got to remember that training is key, and yes, but in a lot of these programs we need to ramp up the coaching and the feedback, and then the on-the-job learning activities. Formalize those. Number 10, failing to document and track activities are common shortcomings of many programs. True or false? True is correct. And then number 11, true or false? True. All right. Good job. Thank you, everyone. I just want to remind you, if you're interested in the social and emotional intelligence, I'll be around. I'm doing a session this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Please remember to leave your evaluations on the table.